It started with a phone call. Not to the police. Not to a neighbor. But to her mother. She's gone. I woke up and she wasn't here. I've looked everywhere. I don't know what to do. Victor Moreno's voice trembled on the other end. He sounded frantic, worried, confused, like a man whose world had been turned upside down. Laura Simmons, mother of 29-year-old Rachel Moreno, froze. The words didn't quite register. Gone? Rachel wasn't the kind of woman to disappear. It was a Thursday morning in late July, the kind of dry Arizona morning where the heat settles in before the sun even finishes rising. Rachel had visited her mother just the day before, along with Victor and their 2 young kids. A simple family dinner at Laura's modest home on the edge of town. Chicken casserole. Lemonade. Laughter from the children playing on the patio. Everything had seemed normal. Rachel had even stayed behind after Victor took the kids back to their place just for a little bit. She wanted to talk. About nothing and everything. About her sister's new baby. About bills. About Victor's mood swings, though she never used that word. He's just stressed, she had said, playing with her necklace. A small silver cat charm that had been with her since high school. Laura had noticed something in her eyes that evening. Not fear. Not sadness. Something else. Like Rachel wanted to say something but couldn't. Or wouldn't. And then she left. That was the last time she saw her daughter. The next morning, Victor's call came just after 10 a.m. He told Laura he'd gone to sleep around midnight. Rachel was next to him. When he woke up, she was gone. Her shoes, purse, everything left behind. Except for her phone. That, apparently, was missing. Laura asked if he had called the police. He hadn't. I wanted to check with you first, he said. His voice cracked again. Maybe she's with you? She wasn't. And Laura's stomach turned to ice. Victor said Rachel had been acting weird the last few days. Secretive. Distant. He even suggested maybe she was having an affair. Laura cut him off. Don't start that, she snapped, barely holding herself together. She'd never leave her kids. Victor fell quiet. Then repeated, I just want her to come home. For the kids. By 2 p.m., a missing persons report had been filed. Victor finally called the police, giving a timeline. Rachel had said she needed fresh air around 1 a.m., stepped out for a walk, and never came back. He claimed he waited until morning, thinking she'd return. He said she'd done this before, walked out after arguments. He didn't mention anything about an affair to the officers. He didn't mention that they'd been fighting nearly every night for the past 2 months. That he had smashed her phone just 2 weeks ago in a fit of jealousy. Or that Rachel had recently reconnected with an old friend from her nursing school days, a man named Jose Allen. Instead, Victor played the part of the grieving husband. Concerned. Cooperative. Heartbroken. The media picked up the story within 48 hours. Young Arizona mother vanishes without a trace, the headlines read. Photos of Rachel smiling with her children flashed across local news broadcasts. Victor appeared on camera, holding his daughter in one arm, his voice cracking as he begged Rachel to come home. If you're watching this, he said, please, just let us know you're safe. The kids need you. The public was moved. But Laura wasn't convinced. Rachel would never disappear like this. Not without a word. Not without calling her mother, her sister, someone. And she'd never, under any circumstance, abandon her children. 3 days passed. No sightings. No calls. No activity on her bank account. And then, whispers started. A neighbor mentioned seeing Victor arguing with someone near the old train tracks behind their housing development the night Rachel vanished. Another neighbor said she'd heard shouting around 1 a.m. But no one had seen Rachel. No one except Victor. Laura pressed him again. Did you hurt her? Victor looked down and said nothing. Detectives began digging deeper. They asked for access to Victor and Rachel's home, located in a working-class suburb in Tempe. Victor agreed but insisted he had nothing to hide. The house was clean. Too clean. One of the officers later said it smelled of bleach. Rachel's clothes were untouched in the closet. Her makeup, toothbrush, everything was still there. It was as if she had stepped outside for a moment and evaporated. Still, without evidence of foul play, the case remained a missing persons investigation. Victor wasn't arrested. There were no charges. Just questions. Then, on the 5th day, a young man showed up at the station. Jose Allen. He looked nervous. Sweaty palms. Uneasy eyes. He said he knew Rachel. They'd met through his sister. Had started talking a few months ago. We weren't, it wasn't serious, he explained, but she needed someone to talk to. Detectives leaned in. He said they had planned to meet near the railroad area early Thursday morning. just to talk like they had a few times before. Rachel had been frustrated, tired, afraid. She told me Victor was watching her phone, reading her messages, following her. And then Jose dropped a bombshell. He said Victor showed up out of nowhere, punched her in the face, right in front of me. I couldn't stop him. Jose claimed he tried to step in, but Victor grabbed a rock and threw it at him, hard. He showed his injured hand, still swollen. Said he ran. Didn't call the police. Didn't go back. He was afraid. He left Rachel there, alone. When detectives returned to Victor, he denied everything. He said Jose was lying. That Rachel had admitted the affair and run off in shame. That she couldn't handle the guilt. But something had changed. Now the police had a witness, an injury, a location. They brought in dogs, drones, and volunteers to search the dry, vacant lands behind the tracks. On the 7th day they found something. A scorched patch of desert. And in the ashes, a silver cat pendant. Laura recognized it immediately. When the footage aired that night, the town leaned in. Victor Moreno was on screen, standing under the dry Arizona sun, his arm protectively wrapped around his daughter, his voice cracking, eyes red, lips trembling. "If she's watching," he said softly, "please, Rachel, just come home." It was a scene made for sympathy, for headlines, for shares. The local station replayed it twice in a single broadcast. It was the kind of image that made you forget to ask questions, that made you believe him. But Laura Simmons didn't cry when she saw it. She stared, not at his words, not at the child in his arms, but at the way he couldn't meet the camera straight on. The way his lips moved a half-second slower than his eyes. The way he said, "The kids need her," but not once mentioned loving her. Victor had always been a hard man to read. Polite when he needed to be. Stoic. Quiet. He rarely raised his voice. But he had rules. And Rachel followed them. To the world, he was a butcher who worked long hours to feed his family. To Rachel, he was a man who kept score. And now, in front of the camera, he was a man on the verge of breaking down. He told the reporters she had been distant lately. Secretive. That she might have left because she couldn't live with what she'd done. He repeated the same phrases. "We were happy. 8 years married. 2 beautiful kids." As if the math itself could erase what was missing. Inside the police station, the detectives were watching too. They paused. Rewound. Watched again. Detective Marla Hines, who had worked missing persons for over a decade, took note of the inconsistencies. The language. The performance. "He keeps trying to build a timeline," she said to her partner. "But he's not telling a story. He's selling one." They started compiling every recorded version of his story. What he told Dispatch. What he told Laura. What he told reporters. What he told them. None of them quite matched. One time Rachel had gone for a walk. Another time she ran off barefoot. Later she drove away with no car. He said she took nothing, but then claimed she stole a large amount of cash. He said she left because of guilt, but couldn't explain what she was guilty of. And through it all, he never asked what the police were doing to find her. The public, however, wasn't paying attention to contradictions. They were caught up in the story. Victor became a sympathetic figure. A single father now. A man betrayed by love. News outlets started running segments. The broken home in Tempe. Talk radio debated the morality of walking out on children. Commenters online called Rachel selfish, unstable, a cheater. Even strangers dropped off care packages at Victor's house. Diapers. Food. A check for $200 from a church group. One woman offered to babysit, until Rachel came to her senses. Rachel's image was unraveling in real time. And Victor let it happen. But not everyone bought the act. Jose Allen, the man Rachel had secretly been talking to, was now under quiet surveillance. Not as a suspect, but as a reluctant witness. He hadn't told the police everything. He was scared. Not just of Victor, but of himself. "I should have gone back," he whispered during a second interview. "I saw her. I saw him hit her. And I ran." He'd met Rachel through his sister. They'd texted, talked, met 3 times. Never at her house. Always in open places. A park, a bus stop, the empty area behind the rail tracks. Rachel hadn't wanted romance. She needed a place to speak, to breathe. She told him things she couldn't tell her family. Things about Victor. His temper. His control. The rules that changed without warning. The way he'd once killed a stray cat in front of the kids and said, "This is what happens when you don't listen." Jose hadn't believed it at first. Rachel said it like a joke, but her eyes didn't laugh. The last time they met, she wore a jacket despite the heat. Jose saw the bruises peeking out from her sleeve. Back at the station, detectives had received the forensic report from the necklace found at the burn site. No blood, no tissue. But it was real, it had been hers. Laura confirmed it. She broke down when she saw the photo. She didn't need DNA. And then, a break, two teenage boys came forward, brought in by their mother. They had been out in the scrublands just outside town, hunting birds with slingshots, when they saw smoke rising near the fence line. At first, they thought someone was burning trash. But then they saw a man, pacing, sweating, watching the smoke like he was waiting for something to disappear. One of the boys had a camera phone. He didn't film the man, but he snapped a photo of the fire. It wasn't trash. It was something bigger. And the man looked a lot like Victor. Investigators returned to the burn site with cadaver dogs and a forensic team. The ground was scorched and disturbed. The smell was faint but still there. Old rubber, char, something else. They started digging. That's when they found it. A section of burned, torn cloth. Bones not whole but broken. A skull fragment wrapped in melted roofing plastic. And in the dirt beside it, a length of electrical cord. There was no longer a missing person. There was a homicide. When they brought Victor in for questioning the second time, he didn't ask why. He sat down, crossed his arms, stared ahead. "Is it about the fire?" he asked. The detectives didn't answer. Victor didn't flinch. "If she's dead, I didn't do it." Victor Moreno had an answer for everything. Where Rachel went. She walked out. Why didn't she bring her keys or phone? Maybe she just snapped. What about the neighbors hearing shouting? Probably someone else. Why didn't he call the police until late? I thought she needed space. But none of it held. Detectives Hines and Keller sat down late that evening to re-examine the timeline. Not the one Victor gave them, but the real one, pieced together from statements, surveillance footage, phone pings, and two scared teenagers with a blurry photo of smoke in the scrublands. Rachel had been seen alive by Jose Allen just before 6:20 a.m. that Thursday morning. He left the scene injured a few minutes later. The first 911 call from Victor to report Rachel missing? 10:17 a.m. That was nearly 4 hours of unaccounted time. When detectives confronted Victor again, this time with printed GPS data from his work truck, the silence grew heavy. His vehicle had been parked on the edge of Desert Valley Wash from 7:02 to 8:41 a.m., not far from the location where the scorched ground and pendant were found. Victor didn't deny it. He just said, "I was driving around, looking for her. Looking for a woman who left the house barefoot and supposedly walked out in the middle of the night, in the opposite direction, while her children slept." Back at Rachel's mother's house, Laura Simmons sat with the lead detective and a legal advocate. They asked her if she could recall anything else. Anything Rachel had said in private. A comment, a text, a warning. Laura hesitated, then nodded. "She came by 2 days before she vanished," Laura said. "She hugged me longer than usual. And she said something strange." "What did she say?" "She said, 'If anything ever happens to me, don't let him speak for me.'" By July 18th, Victor Moreno had been officially arrested. The charge? Second-degree assault with intent to cause serious bodily harm, stemming from Jose's injury. But that wasn't the reason detectives were watching him closely. That was just the hook. The rope was still tightening. Forensic results from the burn site were delayed, but signs were pointing in one direction. The remains were likely Rachel's. The dental records were partial. The bones, too damaged for clear visual confirmation. But one thing stood out. The skull fragment showed compression trauma around the base of the neck. Strangulation. Just like the bruises Laura had once seen on her daughter's neck, and Rachel had brushed off with a forced smile. "We were just playing," she had said. Meanwhile, public opinion was beginning to shift. The same TV stations that once painted Rachel as a runaway were now airing headlines like, "From father to felon? New developments in Tempe disappearance." Victor's neighbors, who had stood in support, now kept their distance. One woman even called the station anonymously, saying she once saw Victor drag a trash bag out to the backyard at dawn, the same day Rachel vanished. The bag was heavy, and he was wearing gloves. Jose Allen remained a reluctant witness. When summoned again for court testimony, he appeared with a cast on his hand and visible anxiety. He confirmed everything. Rachel had been afraid. She had bruises. Victor had struck her. He had fled and didn't report it. "I didn't think he'd kill her," he said. "I thought she'd just go back home like always." He looked down when he said it, because even he didn't believe that anymore. Then came the break that changed everything. A forensic canine team deployed to re-sweep the area surrounding the fire site, uncovered a fragment of tarp half buried in brush 40 feet from the burn scar. It was industrial-grade roofing material, the kind used to suppress smoke during open burns. Inside, they found partial fabric scraps, consistent with the pajamas Rachel had been wearing the night she vanished. And embedded in melted vinyl, a single lock of hair. Long, dark, human. Victor's alibi crumbled further. Detectives discovered security camera footage from a gas station about 3 miles away. The timestamp, 7:11 a.m. on the morning of Rachel's disappearance. Victor was on camera, buying a lighter, a 32-ounce bottle of lighter fluid, and a pack of cigarettes. He paid in cash. The cashier remembered him clearly. He looked off, didn't speak, just stared straight through me. When shown the footage in the interrogation room, Victor didn't argue. He didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just said, "You already think I did it? What else do you want?" Detective Keller leaned in. The truth. But Victor said nothing. In the weeks that followed, the case moved from investigation to preparation for trial. Prosecutors upgraded charges. Now Victor faced first-degree murder, destruction of evidence, and abuse of a corpse. He pleaded not guilty. His defense team pushed a new angle, crime of passion. They argued that Victor snapped upon discovering the affair, and that the killing, if it occurred, wasn't premeditated. But Detective Hines disagreed. So did Laura. So did the fire. So did the footage. Because this wasn't a man who lost control. This was a man who bought supplies, drove out to the desert, watched a body burn, and then came home to make breakfast for his children. And call the mother of the woman he'd just buried. The trial hadn't started, but the walls were already closing in. Inside the Tempe County Courthouse, the case file was getting heavier by the day. Photos, forensics, surveillance, testimonies. Each one chipping away at the image Victor Moreno had carefully crafted. The heartbroken husband, the abandoned father, the man who just wanted his wife back. But for those who knew Rachel, that image had never fully fit. A neighbor came forward first. An older woman named Dina Fuller who lived across the street from the Moreno home. She was retired. Spent most mornings on her porch, sipping coffee and watching the neighborhood slowly wake up. She told detectives that on the morning Rachel disappeared, sometime just after 7 a.m., she'd seen Victor dragging something across the gravel side yard behind their house. She couldn't say what it was, a tarp maybe, but it was heavy, awkward. And Victor looked angry, not panicked, not sad, just angry. "I remember thinking," she said, "that's not how a man looks when he's worried about his wife." Then came the teenage boys, the same two who had reported the fire days earlier. This time they were brought in officially, sworn in, names on record. The younger one, Miguel, only 14, fidgeted constantly in the witness seat. He kept looking at his older cousin Julian as if for permission to speak. "Tell them," Julian said. "Like we practiced." Miguel swallowed. He was burning something. Like big. Like too big to be normal trash. There was a smell. It wasn't like wood. "And the man you saw?" The boy nodded slowly. "Yeah, it was him. It was that man." He pointed across the courtroom, directly at Victor. Victor didn't move. Didn't blink. But his jaw tightened. The prosecution was methodical. They didn't rush. They brought in an arson investigator who testified that the heat pattern on the desert floor indicated the use of accelerants, consistent with lighter fluid. They showed cell tower data that pinged Victor's phone near the exact location of the fire, twice. Once around 7:10 a.m., again at 8:20. They brought in a forensic anthropologist who confirmed that the bones recovered were human, adult female, and consistent in size and density with Rachel Moreno. But the hardest blow came from someone who had, for weeks, stayed silent. Her name was Camila Ruiz. She worked at the same medical office as Rachel, a billing assistant just like her. She and Rachel had shared more than a cubicle. They'd shared secrets. On the stand, Camila trembled. But her voice didn't break. "She told me she was scared," Camila said. "She told me she thought Victor was going to hurt her." The courtroom went still. She didn't say it like a joke. She said it like a warning. "What did you say in response?" "I told her to leave, to come stay with me. But she said she couldn't, that he watched everything, even when she thought he wasn't." Camilla looked directly at Laura, sitting in the front row. She said, "If anything happens to me, don't let people think I ran away." Laura wept silently. She'd heard those words before. She had dismissed them as paranoia. But now they sounded like prophecy. The defense had few moves left. They tried to undermine witnesses, suggested that Camilla had personal feelings toward Rachel, implied that the teenagers were mistaken, confused by heat and fear. They painted Jose Allen as unstable, a man who fled the scene instead of helping. But none of it stuck, because the truth was louder than spin. Victor's alibi was broken. His behavior was inconsistent. His silence, when it mattered most, had screamed. And yet, even as evidence mounted, Victor never confessed. During a private session with the court-appointed psychologist, he claimed he remembered nothing. That the morning Rachel disappeared was a blur. That he must have blacked out. But the psychologist's report told a different story. Victor scored high for narcissistic traits, exhibited emotional detachment, manipulative tendencies. In her conclusion, the doctor wrote, "This is not a man consumed by rage. This is a man who controls, who calculates, who punishes." On day 15 of pretrial hearings, Jose Allen finally took the stand. He looked thin, exhausted, but determined. He recounted the morning Rachel died, in vivid detail. She had texted me the night before, said she couldn't sleep, that she was thinking about leaving him. For real this time. They'd agreed to meet early before the kids were awake. She came wearing a hoodie and jeans. She was nervous, but she smiled. We talked for 5 minutes, maybe 6. And then, Jose's voice dropped. He came out of nowhere. He hit her in the face. Art. She fell. I tried to stop him. He grabbed a rock, threw it at me. He held up his hand, still bearing the faint scar. I ran. I looked back. She was on her knees. He was standing over her. And then, I didn't see her again. Victor interrupted, slammed his hands on the table. He's lying. Tell the truth, man. Tell them what you did. The judge pounded the gavel. Mr. Moreno, sit down. Victor's breathing was shallow, red-faced, hands clenched. But it was too late. Everyone in that room had seen what they needed to see. The trial hadn't started. But the verdict was already forming, not in the courtroom but in the minds of everyone watching. Because the mask was off now. And what stood beneath it wasn't grief. It was control, fury, and finally fear. Not of what he'd done, but of what people now knew. It wasn't just a fire. It was a performance. The kind where the flames were meant to blind you, to erase detail, to swallow evidence. But fire doesn't forget everything. Especially not when it's rushed, underplanned, and carried out by a man trying to look innocent. The forensic team combed the burn site for 2 days. What they pulled from the scorched earth didn't scream, didn't cry, but it spoke. A fragment of jawbone fractured clean across the molars. A cracked tibia half-burned, still wrapped in charred polyester, likely pajama fabric. A piece of melted silver embedded in a clump of tire rubber. It matched Rachel's necklace. The cat charm had fused to the metal. But what stood out most wasn't a body part. It was a pattern. The fire had been built deliberately. Layered, tires on bottom, soaked in accelerant, with roofing material on top to contain the smoke. This wasn't an act of panic. This was design. Detective Hines stared at the photos for hours. This wasn't rage, she finally said. This was cleanup. The temperature of the burn, the way the body had been folded inward, the method of suppression. All of it told a story far more chilling than a crime of passion. It was as if Victor Moreno had rehearsed this. Meanwhile, in court, the prosecution continued to peel away what little was left of Victor's defense. They brought in a fire marshal from Phoenix who explained, in clinical detail, how long a tire burn takes to reach full destruction. Approximately 4 hours, he said, if maintained and properly layered. And Victor? Victor's phone went dark between 6:55 a.m. and 9:12 a.m. that morning. Airplane mode. When it reconnected, it pinged back near the house, exactly when he claimed he had just woken up. There was no longer a question of if he had done it. The only question left was why. Was it jealousy? Control? Did he discover something that pushed him over the edge? But the answer had been there from the start, buried not in the fire but in Rachel's silence. For years, Rachel had lived inside a quiet war. Victor didn't yell. He didn't hit in front of others. He didn't leave marks where they could be seen. He wore respectability like a costume. Hard-working father, soft-spoken husband, reliable provider. But at home, he decided who Rachel could speak to, who she could call, how long she stayed at her mother's house, whether she could work more hours. And when she pushed back, he withdrew, sulked, stared in silence for hours, sometimes days. He didn't raise his voice. He made her raise doubts about herself. When Rachel began talking to Jose, she wasn't seeking love. She was seeking witness. Someone to see her. to believe what was happening behind the smile. And in Victor's mind, that was betrayal enough. In late pretrial motions, a new piece of evidence was introduced. A draft email found in Rachel's workplace inbox, never sent. It was addressed to an unknown recipient. In it, Rachel had written, "If something happens to me, please don't believe what he says. He knows how to sound good. But he doesn't love me. He owns me." The courtroom went completely silent when those words were read aloud. No one looked at Victor. Not even his own attorney. By now the media had turned. Victor was no longer a victim. He was a ghost of a man behind glass, featured in still frames on the evening news, his mugshot paired with photos of Rachel smiling, holding her children, unaware of how her story would end. But this wasn't just a murder case anymore. It was a case about how long abuse can hide behind normalcy. About how control doesn't always look like violence. Sometimes it looks like a smile at a family barbecue. A folded towel left just so. A hand on a shoulder too firm. For Laura Simmons, the trial was not a pursuit of vengeance. It was restoration. To bring her daughter's story back from the fire. To let the world see what Rachel had been trying to say, quietly, carefully, for years. "I didn't raise a coward," Laura said during a public interview. She tried to leave. She tried to speak. But no one was listening loud enough. Victor Moreno showed no emotion when the forensic testimony concluded. He didn't shake his head. Didn't cry. Didn't look at the photos. His face was a mask, just as it had been on the news when he asked Rachel to come home, knowing she never could. It began without fanfare. No shouting. No gasps. No cameras in the courtroom. Just silence. The kind that comes when an entire town gathers to confront something it once refused to see. State of Arizona versus Victor Moreno. Charges: first-degree murder. Destruction of human remains. Filing a false police report. Jury trial. Open to the public. Victor entered the courtroom in a beige detention shirt, hair neatly combed, posture stiff. He didn't look at anyone. Not at the judge. Not at the jury. Not at Laura Simmons, who sat in the front row, her daughter's pendant clutched in her hand. The prosecution didn't waste time. Their opening statement was plain, direct, undeniable. This case is not about a man who snapped. It's about a man who planned, who controlled, who killed, and who burned the evidence before calling the mother of the woman he murdered. The first days of testimony were clinical, scientific, painfully exact. A fire dynamics expert broke down the accelerants used. A medical examiner described signs of strangulation, despite the damage. A forensic odontologist confirmed dental matches. Rachel's molar caps installed 6 years earlier had survived the heat. The jurors sat still. Some took notes. Others didn't blink. No one looked at Victor. He sat expressionless, like a mannequin dressed in regret. Then came the testimony that hit hardest. Jose Allen. He was nervous again, but more prepared this time. He walked through everything, how Rachel had reached out, what she had told him, the moment she collapsed from Victor's punch, how he ran, and how guilt had followed him ever since. The defense tried to rattle him. "You ran and didn't call 911. Are you not responsible too?" Jose didn't flinch. "I'm not proud of that. I was scared. But I didn't kill her. And I didn't burn her." His voice cracked, then steadied. "He did." Then Laura was called. Her walk to the stand was slow, controlled. The courtroom seemed to shrink. She spoke of Rachel's childhood, her laugh, her kindness, the way she used to tuck notes inside her children's lunchboxes, even when they couldn't read yet. Then she told them what Rachel had said just days before disappearing. "Don't let him speak for me." Laura paused. "That's why I'm here. Because he burned her voice. But he doesn't get to bury it." The room was silent. Even the judge took a breath before saying, "Thank you, Mrs. Simmons." Victor kept his eyes on the table. The defense made their move on the 7th day. They didn't deny that Victor had killed Rachel. Instead, they argued why. They claimed he acted in the heat of the moment, a psychological break caused by betrayal, emotional trauma, and shame. They called a psychologist who described Victor as emotionally overwhelmed, with impaired judgment, and a low tolerance for abandonment. The prosecution was ready. They brought back the state's own clinical expert, who had already evaluated Victor after his arrest. Her rebuttal was calm, measured, devastating. "Mr. Moreno does not show signs of temporary insanity. He shows signs of methodical, cold behavioral control. Not panic. Calculation." The final blow came from the evidence chain itself. A photo was shown to the jury, the gas station receipt. 7:11 a.m. Lighter fluid. Cigarettes. Victor's signature. Then another, the surveillance still. Victor. Head down. Holding the bottle. Blank face. Then the fireside. The pendant. The bones. No one said a word. In closing arguments, the prosecutor looked at the jury only once. Rachel Moreno tried to tell us. Through bruises. Through silence. Through fear. And when she finally tried to leave, he made sure her voice would never be heard again. But we hear her now. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Victor never spoke. Not once. Not even when asked directly if he wanted to address the court before sentencing. He declined. Still trying to stay in control even as it all slipped away. Verdict, guilty. On all counts. Sentence, life in prison without parole. Laura wept, not with relief but with the weight of it all. Rachel was gone. But finally someone said it out loud. You did it? The trial was over. But the story didn't end there. Because stories like this don't have clean endings. They leave marks. Not just on court records or news archives, but on people. Victor Moreno was transferred to Arizona State Prison Complex, Amman in Florence. He now spends 23 hours a day in a concrete cell. No photos on the wall. No visitors except for legal counsel. He never appealed the verdict. Never gave a final interview. Never confessed. He simply disappeared, not into mystery but into consequence. The man who once stood crying on television, pleading for his wife to come home, is now inmate number 481199. And the only name anyone remembers isn't his. It's hers. Rachel Moreno is remembered in small, quiet ways. At the medical clinic where she worked, her coworkers framed a photo of her above the break room coffee maker. She made this place warmer, the plaque says. Her children, now living with Rachel's sister in Mesa, ask about her sometimes. They're too young to fully understand, but they know this. Their mother loved them. And someone took her away. One day when they're ready, they'll learn the rest. For now, they know her by the stories whispered during bedtime. By the pendant one of them wears like a secret shield. By the smell of lemon shampoo that still lingers in the back of their grandmother's closet. Laura Simmons, too, is different. She doesn't go to church as often. She doesn't bake as much. She speaks less but listens more. She visits the burn site once a year. Not to cry. Not to rage. But to sit. She brings flowers. And once she brought a wind chime, small and silver with a cat charm hanging at the center. The desert wind catches it just enough. It never rings loudly. Only enough to be heard if you already know what to listen for. Jose Allen moved out of state. He started over, new job, new address, new number. But he never forgave himself. Not for running. Not for staying quiet too long. Not for surviving when Rachel didn't. He wrote a letter to her kids once. He never sent it. He just folded it, placed it in a drawer, and left it there, like unfinished grief. As for the town of Tempe, it changed in subtler ways. The neighborhood where the Morenos lived no longer feels like a place where nothing ever happens. Because something did. And now porch lights stay on longer. People check on their neighbors more. And when a woman in a grocery line looks distracted or tired or withdrawn, someone asks if she's okay. Stories like this don't wrap up neatly. They don't fade when the gavel falls. Because what Victor burned wasn't just a body. He tried to burn memory, identity, voice. But the truth survived him. Not because justice is perfect, it's not. Not because the system is fast, it never is. But because Rachel Moreno didn't vanish. She was erased. And then she was restored. She was the woman who smiled even when tired. Who packed lunches while being controlled. Who held on to hope longer than most would have. Who tried to speak before it was too late. And in the end, her voice returned. Through bone fragments, through testimonies, through fire. Through her mother. Through the silence that followed. Through all of us. Because somewhere, right now, someone is watching this. Someone is listening. And maybe they're afraid. Maybe they're Rachel. Maybe they know a Victor. Maybe they're still deciding whether to leave. Whether to tell someone. Whether to speak. If that's you, then remember this. She didn't stay silent. And neither should you.